Hi, this is Mike Lever from Build.One. In this video, I will do a live demo of the Build.One platform to give you an idea of how it looks and feels to build enterprise business applications with Build.One. So let's log into a sample application. So now that we've seen what kind of screens you can create, let's have a look at how we can create those screens. For this, I'm scrolling down a bit here, and then you see that besides the items, the gray items, which are the normal application screens, I see some red items here, which are config and administration screens. And then you see a yellow or orange areas here, and those are actually the internal Build.One areas. So you can either have those separate in a separate browser, separate screen, or you can integrate them directly into your application. And the reason for that is that Build.One, the whole platform, is built with Build.One. So let's go to the repository part here. And now we see here a list of objects in the repository. So that could be grids, forms, screens, all kind of objects. In this case, I have a filter for offer related stuff or screens. And let's go to another filter. So we see some sample data here. And I could either open one of those screens or for our use case here, let's simply start from scratch, create a new search screen for offers right from scratch. So for this, we go to the floating action button. We select add a new screen. And now we get this dialog where we enter a name for our new object. Let's name that with my shortcut and then search offers, and we give it a description. My first search screen, or something like that. We assign it to a module. Let's assign it to the demo module. And now I could either copy an existing object. So for example, I could search for search screens, and I see my search screen sample here. I could just create a copy of that one, but in our case, we want to start from scratch. So we search for a template that we can use. And we see we have two different templates for search screens here in this environment. So let's start with a simple one. I say, OK, creates the new screen. It appears here in the list. And now let's open this newly created search screen in the designer. I click on this, and then just with the offer, a new screen is launched. But in this case, it's the layout designer or screen designer from the Build.One platform. Here we see in the middle, we see a kind of a sketch of our screen. In this case, we see that the screen is very simple, consists only of one element, and that is a grid or list view, which will later show our data in a list. On the left, we see the overview of our screen. So we see it consists in total of only two objects here, a data source and the grid. And because we use the template here, those objects are only placeholders. So we start by selecting the data source placeholder with a real data source. So for this, we just search for offer. And then we see that we have an offer data source here. We see that it automatically filters only data sources. So we select this one, and now the placeholder is replaced by a data source. We do the same for our grid or list view. Again, we search for offer, and we see here an offer, and we double click on that, selecting it, and we see now our grid. And we save that. And Now we could continue by adding some attributes. So I have here the expert view with all the available attributes. I could also switch to this simplified view. What I would do here is add a title for this. So let's call this my offer search screen. We also add a short title. Let's call this simply offers. We will select a nice icon here. Something about search. What could we use? Let's just use this one here. And yeah, when we just save it and then we launch this screen, and voila, we have our offer search screen here with our icon. We see that this new screen is added to the taskbar once it's launched, and it contains all the functionality that we have already seen. So we have built the offer search screen that we have just used previously to launch additional offer screens. So this, of course, already works. You can filter here, and of course, you can also click on this, and it will launch another screen already seen before. So this works all right out of the box. Now let's close this screen again. Let's go back to our designer and improve a bit on this screen. Okay, so now we have used the template to create a new screen from scratch. Now let's see how we can work with a screen, enhance it, and make this screen a little bit more complex. So assume that your salespeople say or are complaining that whenever they search for an offer, they first need to open the offer to see the detailed data. So they want to see some of the offer data already in the search screen. So the way Build.One works, or the Build.One screen designer works, is that this works similar to a whiteboard. So imagine you talk to your salespeople on a whiteboard and you're scribbling or sketching the way that new screen should look like. Then you would most likely start by saying, okay, I want to have, let's say, one or two more panels with additional information. So in this case, you would select your screen. You would go to the layout part and you would say, okay, I want to have three panels. I want to arrange them like this. One large panel to the left and then two smaller to the right. So I select this panel and now you see that I have two new panels. And now what we can do is we could create a new form in the form designer and add it here to this empty panel. But we could also reuse an existing form. So in this case, let's just reuse the form that we already saw in the offer maintenance screen. So for this, we add the catalog of our objects. And we already see it filtered for all the offer related objects. We have a filter here. So let's open this catalog of objects here. Now I have a filter here with offer related objects. So we now see only forms and grids, in this case related to offer. Let's say we want to enhance that search a bit more. We search for some offer header stuff. And now we see here an offer form with main header data. That's the one that is used actually in the offer maintenance screen. So let's drag and drop this one onto our empty panel. And let's save that screen, launch it again. And then we see we now have changed our screen. We still have our grid with all the functionality, and we have two new panels that we can rearrange. We can make that smaller. We see it's still all responsive here, but we also see that when I click on a record here, nothing changes to the right. So what you would expect, of course, is if you click on a record, then you would display that record. to achieve that functionality, what we could do is we could add a little bit of code here, where when you select the record here, that code gets the data and displays it to the right. But in Build.One, there is another way to do this. So let's go back to our designer. And from our design part here, let's switch to another part of the screen designer, and that is the flow part. So when we switch to this, we see how the building blocks of this screen, how they relate to each other. So we see that with the screen, then we have our data source, and then we see that that data source has a relation, or as we call it, a link to the offer grid. And we also see that the offer form we added is quite isolated here. So what we can do is we can go to our data source and we draw a smart link to the form. Then we tell what kind of relation this is, save it, and now it rearranges automatically. And now we see that from this one data source, we now have two relations, a relation to the grid and a relation to the form. And now if we launch that screen again, and we see as soon as we click on a record, we see the details of this record to the right. So going back to our designer, so each object type, like a data source, a form, a grid, and there are more than 100 object types that we ship out of the box. All those contain some built-in intelligence, and also all the different smart links, the connectors between the objects, they also contain some built-in intelligence, and that allows for a lot of automatic behavior and functionality. Now let's see how we can make the screen even more useful and a bit more complex. So for this, instead of just adding another control, another form or grid or whatever to this empty panel here, we go to our list of objects, we cleaned our filter, and now what we do is we search for a top bar, add that to the empty panel, and the top bar allows us to divide this panel here into multiple pages. So we're going to add a new page here. Let's call that map. And we add another one. Let's call that other. And now we see we have two new elements here. So we have divided that panel into two different pages. Well, let's save this. And now let's add a map to that first tab. So drag and drop it here. And the system will automatically, Build.One will automatically make sure that you add that only where it's possible. So it's not possible here, but you can add it here on a panel. And now you see you get a kind of representation of a map. So this is not an actual Google map or Apple map that you see here. On this level, where you create a screen, it's only important to understand that here a map will be shown. And I could go to the other tab and we could add something here. We could save that. Now we also integrate that map with the rest of the objects. So we go back to our flow part, we draw a connector also to the map, save it. Now there's one more thing we need to do for the map, because the form knew all of the fields it needs to display, but the map, of course, also needs to know the fields it should display. So in this case, we choose city and street here, save it, we launch our screen, and then what we get is we have a nice little map here, and we click on this record, we see how it is updates. We also see, if we go on this, we see the details of the record. We go to another one, we see we have Frankfurt here, and of course we can rearrange that. We have that other tab here, can switch between. Here we did not add anything, and this is how it can work with the screen. And yeah, this is how the screen looks like. Three panels. On one panel, we have 2 pages where you can switch between. And if we go back to our design, this is how it looks in the screen designer. And yeah, you see how easy is this. And in another video, we're going to show you how to add some logic, either in the UI, client-side logic, or backend logic. And we also show how you can do some even more complex stuff here.